Everything that I have said on here is from my own information and from my own experience and from my own research, so if there's anything wrong with it, I apologize sincerely. It's all good.
So the first question is, what do you think it means to be asexual?
So, asexuality is actually a difficult concept to grasp for some people, because we make a big distinction between romance and sexual attraction, and a lot of people think that you can't have one without the other, whereas with asexuals, a lot of the time it is the main thing that we do. So there's a few different categories of asexual. I suppose I should probably talk about those. There's the aromantic asexual, which, you know, that's the sort of type that people think of when people start talking about asexuals. The sort of person who doesn't want a relationship, they're quite happy with friendships, all that sort of stuff. They don't like being pushed into relationships. They're happy alone, basically. And that's where the stereotype of, you know, crazy cat ladies come out, and I really don't like that stereotype. Although it's sometimes funny, it's really bad taste.
I'm gonna be a crazy cat lady.
I'm gonna probably be a crazy dog lady, but hey. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the one that people mainly think about, but it's not the biggest demographic. They actually compiled a whole bunch of polls from around the world and came to the conclusion that potentially 1% of the world's population could be asexual, and ultimately up to 2.8% potentially could be asexual. Anyway, so second category is the Asexual Romantics, and that's the one that I fit into. We want relationships, but we don't want sex. It's pretty simple. We're more in for a deeper emotional connection. We bond really well with people that we want to have relationships with, and obviously the same sort of thing that extends to sexual relationship attractions extends to asexual romantics. So if you can have heteroromantic, you can have homosexual, you can have homoromantic, try again. You can have panromantic, all that sort of stuff. There are a whole bunch of different romantic categories. And then there's the grey asexuals, or grey A's. And they're a little bit difficult to describe because their sexual attraction, readiness, I don't know what to call it, depends on the situation, the person, how they're feeling, all that sort of stuff. And sometimes they just don't bother acting on it because they know it's going to go away, that sort of thing. And once again, you know, their romantic attraction or sexual attraction when it happens can be a whole variety of different categories. Again, I don't like the word categories, but there's no other word that I can use for it. It feels like I'm putting people in boxes or something like that. Anyway, so there's one last category which I feel needs to get a mention, and that's demisexual. And demisexual people, I think, sort of out of them all, probably flesh out our percentage. And that is the ones who feel a sexual attraction only if they have a deep, trusting relationship emotionally with the person. And yeah, so that one, that's probably the most common one out of them all. And I kind of want to, I don't know whether it's obvious or not, but there is a big difference between celibacy and asexual. Celibate, you have the urges to go and procreate and have sex with people, but you suppress them, whereas asexuals don't tend to have the desire for sex or the need for it. And often there's also a difference between being repulsed and being asexual. People who are repulsed can be asexual, and people who are asexual can be repulsed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all people who are repulsed by sex are asexual. So there is a difference there.
Can someone become asexual circumstantially? Like an event happens and they...
Yes, they can. Often, you know, victims of abuse or assault or something like that, sometimes they can become asexual from that event, but I have trouble sort of putting them into the bracket of natural asexual because of the fact that it was a traumatic experience that caused them to be like that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not actually true.
I wanted to ask about how you came to realise you were asexual. Would you call it a kind of coming out process as well? Yeah,
okay, so I've experimented with a few different sexualities along the way, up to about college, so that'd probably be 16 years old. Anyway, I was pretty convinced that I was heterosexual, but I just didn't want sex, basically. And I couldn't understand what having a boyfriend meant. Like, I had friends around me who were having sex, and I didn't know why. I didn't know what the attraction was. I didn't have the urge for it, all that sort of stuff. So I thought, hey, maybe I'm not heterosexual. That was when I got into college and started hanging out with people who were a little bit more sexually open. And I got exposed to lesbianism, you know, all that sort of wonderful stuff. So I started thinking, hey, maybe I'm not straight. Maybe I'm, in fact, lesbian. And I sort of went like that for a little while before realizing, hey, that doesn't really ring true either, because I still don't want to have sex with people. And it's not, you know, like I said, it's not a repulsion. It's just, I don't care. I don't want it.
No interest.
No interest at all. And yeah, so eventually I got to the point where I thought, by default, let's go with demisexual, because I've never had a close emotional bond with somebody. I ended up having a close emotional bond with somebody, still didn't want to have sex. So I just sort of basically went, yeah, I want to have relationships, I don't want to do the dirty. That's pretty much what it is.
So did you have to come out to people? Did you have to disclose this to friends or family?
I did end up having a coming out party. It was, you know, wonderful affair, rainbow clothes, everything, because the sort of specific thing that I am is Aromantic Asexual, so I want to have relationships with women. I had a coming out party, and it took a while, but I did eventually tell my parents that I probably wouldn't be bringing a boyfriend home, and I pretty much definitely wouldn't be having any kids anytime in the near future. I mean, the thing is as well with asexuality is that it can change. It doesn't mean that you should assume that it changes, but it can change. Something in your biology just might go, hey, I want kids, and then it can change.
Okay.
But pretty much from day one I've been like, nah, no sex, thanks.
What was the kind of reaction you got from friends and family?
Friends kind of, oh, okay, that's cool. We kind of already guessed that. Parents was a little bit more difficult because I was brought up in a Christian household. So, you know, the idea was that I would have grandchildren, have a husband, have a happy life, that sort of thing. And then, you know, when I sort of came out as, hey, I'm going to have relationships with women, it took them a bit of time to adjust. But yeah, it eventually worked out. They're pretty accepting now, so it's cool.
Were there any misconceptions you've encountered, or
oh my gosh. Okay.
Discrimination?
So one of the most annoying phrases that I have got being asexual is, you haven't met the right person yet. It's the same thing that's used for lesbians, it's the same things that used for gay guys. It's, you haven't met the right person yet. And basically, it pisses me off to no end, because it makes an assumption that either you're going to change for a person, or the person who is saying you haven't met the right person doesn't have respect for your own identity. And that's not fair. I tend to stop talking to people who say stuff like that if they know what asexualism is.
I've always felt like that phrase, whenever they use it, kind of perpetuates the idea that you're not complete without another person.
Yeah.
In like any kind of relationship. Instead of respecting that you are your complete self, you are, like you were saying, your complete identity.
Yes.
And that's what, yeah.
Exactly. And also, you know, society is really, really into relationships. A lot of high school kids are all like boyfriends, girlfriends. And the few relationships that I've been in, it's been, hey, I like you, I like your personality, let's have sex. Pretty much. That's been like the outline of my serious relationships. And as soon as it gets to the let's have sex point, it all crumbles because I don't want it.
How does it feel when someone pressures you into it?
Well, I've never been pressured into it.
Okay, good.
Because I know my mind, and the people that I've been dating have been very decent people.
That's good, that's good. I kind of meant more
but
pressuring in general.
Pressuring in general, it makes me a little bit sad. Because with the exception of the earlier relationships, these people knew that I didn't want to have sex. And yet they entered into the relationship. So not only does that, you know, make me feel pressured, it also means that they don't have respect again for that identity of I don't want sex. Which then, you know, makes it sort of like, hey, I'm in a relationship with you, therefore you're going to change for me. You're going to change who you are for me.
And you should never have to do that.
Exactly.
What about romantic interaction? Obviously sex is not what you're interested in, but things like kissing, hugging.
It differs from asexual to asexual. Oh, by the way, one of the contraction for asexual is ace, because it's easier to say than asexual over and over again, so I'm going to use that from now on.
Awesome.
So it differs from ace to ace. Some enjoy playing, but don't go into the sex thing. Some even actually have sex with their partners because they understand that the partner wants it, which is something that I couldn't do, but some people can do it. Other people go into open relationships, so half open, where the asexual person is loyal emotionally, and the other person goes out for things like one night stands, which I think would be a really difficult relationship, but I'm sure it works for some people. In my case, it mostly just goes for kissing and cuddling. I don't tend to go any further than that. I enjoy physical closeness, but intimacy is not interesting and slightly weird.
Because I know a lot of people cannot separate the sexual from the emotional.
Yes.
But they are in fact two separate things.
Yes.
So how does the emotional feel when you have a close relationship as opposed to, you know, a close friendship with somebody?
Okay, so I'm working on a document, I suppose, an explanation called The 4 Types of Attraction. And basically it talks about how there are 4 main, again, categories, there's no other word for it really, of attraction. There's the physical side, where you're attracted to a person aesthetically, you know, you like how they look, but you're not interested in them. It's like you're looking at a painting or something like that. You really wouldn't want to do it with a painting unless it was a weird fetish. But yeah, so that's the first category. Second category is mental attraction, which is the thing that you sort of have with friends and family and all that sort of stuff. It's love, but it's not romantic. It's, I like the way you act, I like the way you talk, I want to spend time with you because you're my friend and I love you. Then there's the sexual attraction, which is basically I want to go behind that building there and have some fun. And that sort of ties in with biology and lust and all that sort of stuff. And then there's romantic attraction. Romantic attraction is the deep emotional bond that you get with a partner. And it's, in today's society, very difficult to untangle from sexual attraction. And there is really no way that I can describe it in a way that will help sexual people understand, well, I don't like using the word sexual either because it kind of makes them sound like they're driven by lust. Anyway,
Sexually active.
yeah, sexually active people. I can't explain it in a way that will help them to understand fully, because they have only ever experienced it with the chemical, biological thing happening as well. In my particular case, the thing that's missing is the sexual attraction. I get the other three types of attraction, but I don't get the sexual attraction. I don't want to go behind a building and bang somebody. It's just not there. I don't have that biological imperative of, hey, you're good looking. With aromantic asexuals, both the romantic and the sexual attraction are a non-entity. They don't exist. And it's actually, in some ways, easier to be aromantic asexual, because then you don't have to explain the fact that you're romantically attracted to somebody but you don't want to have sex with them.
Would you try explaining what you feel when you feel very romantically attracted to somebody?
You get the butterflies in the pit of the stomach. And you want to spend lots and lots of time with them. You get crushes. You want, basically what you want to do is get close to them, know them, love them, all that sort of stuff. And even the sort of the closeness and the intimacy, up to a certain point you want that as well. Well, I do anyway, some people don't. But the actual act of sex is not necessary. There we go, I've got it now. Because the way that you bond is not the same way as a person who is sexually active would bond. Because to them, sexual intimacy brings them closer to the other person, both mentally and physically. Whereas an asexual romantic, or grey A, or demisexual, it's less necessary. They can get closer to a person with less intense actions and less intense time spent and all that sort of stuff. So sitting next to each other, watching a movie and eating chocolate, that's a wonderful bonding experience, and it can be completely romantic.
Any other misconceptions?
Okay, so one of the misconceptions that I really hate is that people automatically assume that we're actually repressed and we really, really want it. Which is obviously not the truth. And some people may claim that they're asexual and actually not be. I'm not quite sure why they would want to do that, but okay. And another misconception is that asexuals just need to have sex with somebody who knows what they're doing. And really, that's not the case. I mean, personally, I'm a virgin. I have never had sex. And just because I've never had sex doesn't mean that I'm not asexual because I've never had it. I mean, talk to somebody who is just average Joe and say, hey, have you ever had sex with a llama? And they'll probably say no, unless they're a bit,
Let's hope they say no.
Let's hope they say no. And they'll say no, I haven't had sex with a llama. And I said, and you'd say, well, you just need to have sex with a llama that knows what it's doing, and then you'll like to have llama sex. And I mean, that's a really extreme example, but that's basically what you're telling the person is, just because you haven't had it doesn't mean that you don't know you don't want it. All that sort of stuff.
It's so interesting because identifying as bisexual myself,
yeah,
I'm hearing a lot of the same things, but obviously in different circumstances.
Yes.
I think asexuality and bisexuality are considered the invisible ones, even within the queer community. Yeah, how does that make you feel?
Well, I've always considered asexuality, or aces, as the sort of black sheep of the queer community, mostly because we don't really fit in with the sexually active side of the community. So pansexual, bisexual, homosexual, all that sort of stuff, they're all cool and off doing the dirty with their boyfriends, girlfriends and others. But the asexuals sort of just sit behind here and go, hey guys,
We're
having a
here
good
too.
party. And we sort of sit here by ourselves and socialise with each other, and nobody really wants to get to know us. They sort of use us as a, oh hey, yeah, you exist too, and yeah, that's cool, and then they move on to talking about homosexuality again.
So, have you encountered many less desirable experiences within the queer community?
I haven't personally, but I have talked to people who are in the asexual community who have. Mostly the ones who are just like, oh yes, you just need to try some D, or you just need to try some V. Basically the same thing that everybody else would say.
So there aren't any specific ones they use directly?
Frigid is one of them. You know, just saying you're really standoffish, no wonder nobody wants you, all that sort of stuff. We're kind of basically classified as a standoffish bunch because we don't actively engage in sex.
Yeah, I mean, I've always found it interesting how even within the queer community there can be discrimination between identities.
And it's so strange. I mean,
we've all been discriminated against for our own identities.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, in some cases, it's the classic bully complex. You get bullied at home, therefore you go and bully other people to make yourself feel better.
Is that kind of where you think the whole discrimination, homophobia, transphobia comes from?
No. That's part of it, I think, in some cases. In other cases, it may be a lack of knowledge, or in other cases, it may just be a willful lack of wanting to know. If some people, you know, find it against their religion or something like that, they don't want to understand. They don't want to try and think about this sort of thing because it's against their religion, and they find it bad and horrible and all that sort of stuff. Basically, the worst thing that we have is a lack of understanding. I think that's the biggest thing. And religion is one of my bugbears. Anybody who is a fanatic in their respective religions really, really irks me, because they put on blinkers voluntarily and don't start sort of thinking about how other people might see the world.
Are there any specific ideas that you have on how to combat ignorance, specifically to do with asexuality?
Well, ignorance there's not much you can do about. Lack of knowledge you can do a lot about, because you can go out and basically have asex rallies and all that sort of stuff. One of the symbols of asex people is that we wear a black ring, and I can't remember whether it's on our right middle or right forefinger. It's one of those.
Okay.
Anyway, black ring. And yeah, so that's something that I think should be more widely acknowledged, because it means that we can be a little bit more proud about our asexuality and say, hey, we don't want sex and we're happy to be like that. And I mean, the other thing is obviously education. Education is a really big thing, and I think that's why the queer community is getting more and more recognition, and more people are sort of slowly coming out and saying, hey, I'm not actually straight, I am not heteronormative. Because more understanding is happening, more education is happening, and people are starting to realise that this is something that's been happening for years. I mean, you know, Oscar Wilde, for example, got put into jail for being gay, and he was one of our more prominent playwrights of the world.
Did you ever have any difficulties accepting yourself
Yes.
as asexual? Yeah.
Yes, because I actually like children. Like, I know it sounds a bit strange because I'm not particularly fond of wanting children of my own, but I actually like kids. So coming to terms with possibly that's one of the reasons why I don't want kids sort of gave me a bit of a revelation. And also realizing that I can't handle kids that are under 4 years old. It's just, I worked in childcare for a year and it drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Also, coming to terms with the fact that I couldn't just go out and say, hey, do you want to date me? To somebody that I had a crush on. Because suddenly there was this whole level of, does this person want sex? Is this person sexually active? Will this person stay faithful to me even if I don't give them physical intimacy? So basically, at the moment, I've kind of signed off relationships because there are very few asexual women, Aromantics, in Canberra that I know of that are out as asexual.
So it was the realization that you may potentially have to do this, have to be explaining, have to be constantly questioning, does this person want sexual relations? Or potentially the rest of your life.
Pretty much. Yeah. So I kind of went down the route of, I don't care, maybe I'll find someone in the future.
How patient are you when it comes to explaining to others your identity? Obviously,
I
you're
am
very open.
patient and very open, because there are certain things that I don't talk about, but this isn't one of them. I'm very open. I'm really encouraging any sort of education which comes with sexuality of any kind, even if it's asexuality, and yeah, just basically allowing people to identify how they want and have relationships with who they want, is something that I really encourage and really can't be explained enough. So I enjoy explaining it. It's one of the things that I do. I actually, last night I actually got a message from somebody on a dating site that I'm part of. And she said, hey, I've never seen anybody who identifies as openly asexual. Can you help me with a few things? And I was like, yes.
A question just popped into mind. You know, the four different types of
Yes.
asexuality you mentioned earlier. Have there been discrimination between types?
Not really. We tend to, as far as I know, because I haven't met anybody who's been discriminated against by other asexuals, I would imagine that there is a potential for discrimination against grey A's because they're not true asexuals, they sometimes want sex. So I would imagine there could be some discord there. Same thing with demisexuals, but I don't know because I haven't experienced it myself.